Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with each and every one of you today. I'm truly honored. As Charles said, I've been a licensed psychotherapist for 25 years, and it is my passion and my purpose to remove the shame and stigma around mental health issues and financial stress, and to provide people and organizations with practical tools to heal, recover, thrive, and prosper. And that is my hope and intention for you today. My favorite thing about being a therapist is mirroring back to my clients everything that is unique and gifted and amazing about them, and empowering them to align those gifts with the need in the world to the greatest extent possible. And that is my intention for you today as we share this time together. I want to thank you for the important work that you do each and every day in your tribes, in your counties, in your families, in your communities, and in this beautiful state of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. The work that you do may not always be acknowledged, and the work that you do is so important. You are providing advocacy, education, assistance, guidance for so many people who are in need. People who are marginalized, who are socioeconomically disadvantaged during these incredibly challenging times. And each and every one of you is a human being dealing with these challenges as well. And so this is a time and space for you to honor yourself and everything that you've been through in the past several years. A few years ago, I had the honor of speaking for the Maine Counseling Association. They kidnapped me for an extra day, but that's a long story. That's a separate story. But I remember sitting at a dinner, and one of the counselors there told me that she was retiring. And she shared with me the most beautiful story. She'd worked as a school counselor for 40 years. And she said that recently she was in the grocery store, and a man in his 30s approached her. And he said, "Aren't you Mrs. So-and-so?" And she said, "Why, yes, I am." And he said, "You were my school counselor when I was 10. And he reached his hand in his pocket, and he pulled out a small stone. It was a worry stone that she had given him 30 or 20 years before. And he said, "I carry this with me every day, and thank you." We don't always hear from the people that we help how we've impacted their lives, but you are a ripple effect of goodness, providing healing and hope and recovery throughout the land of Minnesota and beyond. So I'd like us to take a moment here, and I invite each and every one of you to face forward. If you're holding something in your hands, please put it down. And please put both of your feet on the floor. Rest your hands gently in your lap. And I'm going to guide you through a very short meditation. So I'd like you to get comfortable in your seat. Feel the gravity pulling you down in your chair. Notice your posture and straighten your spine, imagining that there's a cord coming out of the top of your head that's pulling you up toward the ceiling. And gently tuck your chin. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes or just have a soft gaze down your nose. And I'd like you to turn your attention inward. I'd like you to notice how you feel in your body today, with no judgment, total self-compassion, just noticing where you might be holding tension or stress. And begin to connect with your breath. Notice if your breath is short and shallow and fast, or is it deep, extending fully into your belly? Imagine as you breathe in that you are breathing in exactly what you need. Maybe that's energy, hope, faith, peace, serenity, or love. And as you exhale, I want you to imagine that you are breathing out all that is no longer serving you. Any stress, any worries, anything that you are holding or carrying for somebody else. Maybe that's a family member or some client that you serve or a staff member. Breathing in what you need, nice and deeply through your nose. Breathing out what is no longer serving you. And imagining as you're breathing out the yuck, the gray, anything that isn't feeling good in your body, that it is melting off of you and going through the ground, just melting off of you and into the ground, and Mother Earth will hold it for you. It is not yours to carry. Continuing to take nice, deep, cleansing breaths, I'd like you to place your right hand over your heart. And I'd like you to thank yourself. I want you to honor yourself and what you have been through personally and professionally over the last several years. I want you to thank yourself for getting yourself here today and for your resilience and for your capacity to extend yourself to others. And feel the warmth of your hand over your heart, knowing that you are holding yourself with deep love and self-compassion. I'd like you to place your other hand on your belly. And I want you to imagine that behind your hand on your belly is your light, your unique flame, your soul, your spirit, your authentic self. And I want you to imagine that as you're breathing in, you are fanning that flame, providing it with clear, white, positive, loving energy. And that flame is growing. And you can feel the warmth, the cleansing warmth moving throughout your whole body. And now I'd like you to slide your hands so that you are holding yourself. You are hugging yourself. Your hands have moved up to your shoulders. And I'd like you to give yourself a squeeze. And again, say thank you. I'd like you to imagine one client that you know that you've helped, or maybe it's a staff member or somebody in your community or family. And I'd like for you to consider for a moment how your work together may have changed their lives. The work that you do is important, and so are you. And today is about taking care of you. Taking a couple more cleansing breaths, you can give yourself one more squeeze and relax your arms back down to your lap. Breathing in, breathing out, even feeling free to shake off any residual tension or yuck. Beginning to wiggle your fingers and your toes, and very, very gently opening your eyes and coming back to the room. Thank you. Is anyone willing to share what was that like for you? What did you notice? Just shout it out. Relaxing, freeing. Did anyone feel emotional or cry? Sometimes that happens, and that's okay. It's a release. So what we just did took a few moments. It was free. And you may feel better right now. And that is something that you can take with you and you can do any time that you need. Meditation is the easiest way to reboot the mind, the body, and the spirit. And now, I'd like us to honor for ourselves and for our loved ones and for the clients that we serve, the stressors that we are all currently dealing with. We're in this post-pandemic era. We're all exhausted and burnt out. Many of us are overworked. We are living during a time of great political divide and unrest. No matter which side you're on, this time is stressful for, I think, all of us. We're living during a time of great economic uncertainty, and for yourselves and the populations that you serve, that has a negative impact on our mental health and our financial health. You may be dealing with dependent care. Maybe you have kids. Maybe you're caring for your aging parents. Maybe you have a disabled loved one at home that you care for, in addition to being a caretaker at your jobs. So I want you to honor each and every one of these stressors and recognize that they're very real and they're very chronic for each and every one of us. This is a statistics from the American Psychological Association, and it's very staggering. 27% of Americans are so stressed out that they cannot function on a daily basis. Wow. And I imagine of that 27%, some of them are us, and many of them are the clients that you serve. The statistics also show that the stress levels are higher for younger people, members of the Gen Z generation and millennials, and also are higher for Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and people who are marginalized, including the LGBTQIA+ population, financially disadvantaged people, women, etc., disabled people. The list goes on. The signs and symptoms of stress, and I'm saying this to you because I want you to really check in with yourselves today and notice how is stress showing up for you. Some of us feel it first in our bodies. If you're having headaches or migraines or stomach aches, or you're just not feeling well, your immune system is compromised, that can be a response to stress. Sometimes when we're under stress, It shows up in our emotions. We might be more irritable or more agitated. And that might be something that you see in the people that you work with and you work for. And that is a normal response to stress. Far more of us have become kind of apathetic. And forgive me if I say that I can feel that in this room. I can feel energetically a shutdown. And so I want you to honor that I can feel that there's a significant level of burnout in this group. And so the hope and intention for today is that you start to practice some of the skills that I'm going to share with you so that you can recover and thrive and prosper. Sometimes when we're under stress, our brain malfunctions. Just like a computer, when too many screens are open, there are glitches, and our brain doesn't work properly. So if you're forgetting words, you're distracted, you're making mistakes or errors, or you're having difficulty making decisions, that can be a normal response to stress. For many of us, our stress shows up in our relationships. So if you're having arguments with your partner or your kids or your coworkers, you're not alone. When we're under stress, we are not our best selves. And I understand that with the people that you serve and you work with, that you see good people often at their worst. I think of a time where I'm dating myself. I was at Blockbuster renting a video. And I had some issue, I don't remember what it was, but I was extremely rude to the sales clerk. My father had died the day before. That sales clerk did not know what I had been going through. I was not in a good place. I was not behaving well. And so sometimes what we see of people is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much that we don't know about what they're dealing with, what their trauma history is, what their current life stressors are. And so we must remember to give grace and practice self-compassion for ourselves. And for some of us, our stress shows up financially. We're going to be talking a lot about the interconnection between mental health and financial health. And it sounds crazy, but often when we're under stress, we overspend. It's like it's self-harm disguised as self-care. So we practice retail therapy, we might Amazon things, we might have some compulsive buying, and usually that happens when we're feeling out of control. You know, I got these sparkly shoes on Amazon, but we're not talking about me right now. Hopefully I'm not the only one who has packages show up and you're like, what's that? Stress versus burnout. Stress is anything that our minds or bodies experience as overwhelming, and burnout is a prolonged and chronic state of stress. Now, come on, wouldn't you say that we've all been under a chronic and prolonged state of stress? These are the symptoms of burnout. I want you to look at them, and I want you to be honest with yourself if you see these symptoms within yourself or your coworkers or your loved ones. Now, I want everyone to stand up. And we're gonna play a little game here. And there's no judgment, okay? Because we're all human and we're all dealing with different challenges. And none of us is perfect. So this is a safe space, no judgment. I want you to imagine that you're a cell phone. And I want you to imagine that if you were a cell phone, what would your battery charge be at right now? And I want you to think of that number. Are you at 80%? Are you at 50%? Or is your battery almost dead? So I'm going to name out some percentages, And as I name them, if you identify with them, then I want you to sit down. So we're going to start with over 90%. Anybody whose internal battery is over 90%, please go ahead and sit down. Whoa. I think I see one person sitting. What's your secret? 2. Over 80%, you can sit down. This is very few. I speak across industry. This is very significant, you all. Over 70%, you can sit down. Okay, love the honesty. Thank you for your courage and your honesty. Over 60%. Thank you. Over 40% can have a seat. For every person that is standing up right now, I'd like every person who is seated to send them love. Send them love and support. Remember who these people are, and during the breaks today, check in with them. I see you sitting down. Did I tell you to sit down yet? You may sit down. We are not like cell phones. We don't get the red bar alert, and we have to pay attention to our own internal battery charge. I noticed my teenage daughter, Claudia, God bless her, I love her to pieces. I'll be feeling pretty good, and then Claudia gets in the car and starts talking to me, and man, I can feel that battery just drain. And then I know it's my responsibility to recharge my battery. So that's what I'm asking for each and every one of you. That is, as you move throughout your day, do an internal check, ask yourself how you're doing, and make decisions based on that. Maybe you need to go for a little walk, do a brief breathing exercise or visualization. Maybe you need to call a friend for support or simply have a snack and a glass of water to recharge yourselves. The mental health implications of the pandemic and the years beyond have been dire. And I know that you see that in yourselves and your loved ones. I am so passionate about removing the shame and stigma around mental health. I think we all have mental health just like we have physical health. There's no shame, no stigma. Our mental health is determined on our genetics, our epigenetics, our ancestry, our ancestors' trauma history lives in our DNA, and we are predispositioned to respond to stress differently. Some of us with depression or anxiety or addiction. And the level of stress that we have versus the levels of support and self-care determine our mental health. None of us expects anybody to have perfect physical health, and we cannot have perfect mental health either. We have to take care of it on a daily and regular basis. So briefly, I want to share 65% of Americans, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, identify with symptoms of anxiety, which can be rumination, overwhelm, panic attacks, physical tension in the body, difficulty sleeping, etc. 45% of Americans identify with symptoms of depression. And I'll let you know that as lay people, I think a lot of us think that depression is when people are feeling really sad, they're crying, and maybe they're having suicidal thoughts or feelings. But depression can also manifest as anger, irritability and agitation, especially if a person has a trauma history. And there's also lower levels of depression. Some of us who maybe grew up in a challenging family system or home environment may have a low-grade chronic depression since childhood. And our baseline moods are not as high as most people. That's a normal response to everything that you've been through, and help is available and effective. Substance use disorders are on the rise. Many of us turn to drugs or alcohol to self-medicate our stress and our anxiety or depression, or our worries about the uncertainty of the future. So I want you to be mindful of that within yourselves and the people that you serve, and to become mental health advocates, and to have honest conversations with people about getting help. Seeing a therapist should be like going to the dentist or the doctor. It does not mean you're crazy. You would not wait to get a root canal. You wouldn't wait to go to the dentist until you needed a root canal or your teeth started falling out. You would go preventatively. And that's what I want people to think about for therapy. Think about it as a wellness check. I love this infographic, and I want every one of you to look at it. So many times when we're talking about mental health, people think about mental illness. But it's a continuum, just like with physical health, between health and disease. And so there's a continuum from being in crisis to thriving and excelling. I speak to organizations across industry, across the globe, 50 or more presentations per year. Most of us are falling and struggling or surviving. And that's the truth of it. So you are not alone if you see yourself in that area. And if you identify with being in crisis or struggling or surviving, I want you to make an appointment with a therapist this week. That's an act of self-care. You deserve support and help. And if you know people who are in those categories, I want you to care enough to say something. I think sometimes we're socialized to stay out of other people's business, and so we turn a blind eye. And instead, we need to say, I notice these changes in you. I'm concerned about you. I care about you. Do you know about these resources that are available to you? I will help you get set up with a professional. So I want every one of you to pull out your phones. This is a QR code, so go ahead and hold your phone up, and it will bring you to a landing page that has copies of my slides, all my handouts, and tons of mental health resources and exercises that you can take with you and take back to your teams and to your loved ones. And if you're having difficulty accessing that, ask one of your neighbors at your table, or I'll show that QR code again at the end of the presentation. Today we are talking about the psychology of success. This is one of my favorite presentations. I've been giving it for about 15 years, but this is an updated version of it that's infused with financial health information as well. So as a counselor for over 25 years, working in the Chicago area with a very diverse range of clients. I worked in methadone maintenance, I worked in community mental health, I worked in EAP, so with corporate clients, and also in private practice. And I saw that there are 12 keys to success. I paid attention to my clients, and it was such an honor and a blessing to learn from them. And I paid attention to what makes people happy and successful. And they include these 12 mindsets, which we're going to learn today. And they include abundance, presence, essence, which is the opposite of ego, compassion, support, positivity, detachment, and more. The first mindset we're going to spend a little bit more time on because I know you do a lot of work around financial health. Abundance is a mindset that there's more than enough resources for all of us, and that when we collaborate and we're creative and we're open-minded, we can break through limitations and find bounty. Whether that's food or jobs or money or love. How many times have you heard somebody say, man, there's no one good to date in Minnesota? That's a scarcity mindset about love. An abundance mindset is that love is available everywhere and that I am deserving of it. Something really interesting happened as I started practicing as a therapist in Chicago. By the way, I had $50,000 of student loans, and when I started my grad program in the early 90s, when I graduated from it, the starting salary for a therapist was $18,000 a year. And so I was stressed, supporting myself and living in Chicago. And I noticed something really curious about my therapy clients. Client after client was coming into session and telling me that they were getting raises and promotions. They were starting their own businesses and side hustles, and they were making more money. They were going on vacations. I'm like, what is going on? We are treating their depression and anxiety and substance use issues. Why is everyone making more money, and how can I do this? And I realized it's because in counseling, we're always working on our underlying self-worth or self-esteem. And as we get to know ourselves better, and we silence that inner saboteur, and we embrace our gifts, we put ourselves out in the world with more confidence and more assertiveness. We're willing to try new things and expand our comfort zones. And we're willing to negotiate and advocate for ourselves. And all of that has a financial return. So I'm letting you in on a little secret. We therapists always specialize in our own issues. So I have had tremendous financial anxiety. My father was born during the Great Depression. He lived in the inner city of Cleveland. His parents worked at a factory. He lived in an apartment with his grandparents, aunts and uncles, and cousins. He understandably had a scarcity mindset about money, that there's not enough food, jobs, or money to go around, and so we need to be afraid. And I believe that we all recreate unconsciously what we grew up with until we become aware and we choose something different. And I recreated a very similar situation. My father became kind of a workaholic, and he was a very successful businessman. But when I was 8 years old, he became unemployed during the automotive recession and was unemployed for the rest of my adolescence. And he dealt with clinical depression. In my story, I started a practice in Chicago with $500, $50,000 of student loans, with the mission to make therapy accessible and affordable for everyone. So we were in network with every insurance plan, and we grew tremendously. And then I ended up in cash flow hell. Because the insurance payments take amount of time to come in, we had a cash flow problem. I wasn't able to pay my rent or my staff on time. It was humiliating. It was massively stressful. I had insomnia and panic attacks. And then I used the tools and strategies that I'm teaching you today and that are in my book, The Financial Mindset Fix, to change the course and turn the ship around. And I did it with the help of so many people, and you and your clients can do this too. I became very interested in the psychology of money. So I want you to think for a moment, what did your parents or grandparents say about money? What were you told about people who have a lot of money or very little money? What were you told about your relationship with money? What was your belief about your earning potential? And when I'm talking about money, I am not talking about materialism, excess, or greed. I am talking about money because it is a very real aspect of our access to healthcare, to education, to a happy life, and we can also help more when we have more. We can give to charities, we can be philanthropists, we can volunteer. And so I want you to think about your thoughts about money, your emotions around money, your behaviors with money. Some of us have compulsive behaviors with money, whether that's spending or saving. And I want you to think about your financial boundaries in relationships, at home and at work. Are you allowing your boundaries to be compromised? Or do you see that in your clients? So there's this intrinsic relationship between mental health and financial wellness. When we have financial stress, it obviously impairs our mental health, and very seriously so. 16% of suicides are financially driven. Financial stress can trigger and exacerbate major depressive disorder, anxiety disorders, substance misuse disorders, and can trigger financially triggered post-traumatic stress disorder. I think a lot of people think that PTSD is something that war veterans or victims of a natural disaster or an assault experience, but each and every one of us has our own trauma history. And we also carry the trauma history of our ancestors, including their financial traumas. It lives in our epigenetics and is how our neurology is predispositioned to respond to money stress. Also, when our mental health is suffering, it impairs our ability to make money. If we're depressed or we don't feel good about ourselves, we're not going to be as motivated or productive. Financial trauma. I want you to look at this slide. And remember that you have copies of these slides. If you have any difficulty seeing them, you can bring them up on your phones. But financial traumas include racism, sexism, and marginalization that leads to financial discrimination, ability to access education, jobs, training, and promotions. Living in poverty is a financial trauma. If you've gone through a breakup or a divorce that costs you money and financial hardship, that's a trauma. Accidents or injuries. So remembering this when you're dealing with your clients, and the way that trauma works is a current trauma taps into our trauma history. So maybe we went through something challenging in our childhood or earlier life experiences that we thought we kind of managed and had under control. And then we have a financial trauma. We lose our job. And suddenly those old trauma symptoms are coming back. We're having anxiety dreams and nightmares, difficulty sleeping, symptoms of depression and anxiety. So very important to recognize the signs of financial trauma. So looking at this slide, and I went through many of these. Workaholism was one. When I was cash flow negative, I thought it was a great idea when I woke up worrying about money at 3 in the morning to do my billing and work on my company, which impaired my physical and mental health. Lack of financial boundaries, financial abuse, underspending, and hoarding. My grandmother, my father's mother, was a hoarder because she lived during the Great Depression. So she would go to banks and she would get the free pamphlets and things, and she would put rubber bands around them because she remembered having no paper during the Depression. So these are normal responses to what people have been through, and we must respond with empathy and compassion. These are some of the symptoms of financial trauma. Maybe the phone rings and we're worried it's a bill collector. Maybe we don't want to open our emails because there's some past due notices or people are asking us where the money is. We might have difficulty sleeping. We might feel sick physically. We might have rumination, or we might even become a little obsessive compulsive, checking our bank accounts and financial statements. So we talked about an abundance mindset, and I mentioned my dad had a scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset is very common right now. So think about the toilet paper thing, right, during the pandemic. That's scarcity mindset. I live in Florida. When the hurricane news came out, you couldn't even get to a gas station. The gas was out to the first 4 gas stations that I went to because people are competing over the resources. So scarcity mindset is also a normal response to financial trauma. So if you or your clients grew up with financial trauma, it is likely you're going to have a scarcity mindset, which fuels money anxiety. And money anxiety can be triggered by any of the things on this slide. Increased debt, maybe some of you have how many still have student loans? Yeah, I mean, many of us do. It's very stressful. Maybe additional financial responsibility. Maybe one of your parents retired and now you need to help them. So we want to honor our financial anxiety triggers and those in the people that we serve. As we talked about stress, we can also experience money anxiety differently. Some of us feel it in the body, some of us feel it emotionally, some of us have cognitive symptoms, but it's also really common for people to isolate because they're ashamed. I was so ashamed when I was cash flow negative. I thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy. And it wasn't until I started opening up and I practiced humility and I started telling people, guys, I screwed up and I need help. And once I did that, help came out of the woodwork. So we need to stop suffering in silence and reach out for the help that we all need and deserve. We are all interdependent as human beings. And some of us who work in fields like we do are helpers. And for helpers, sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. And so that's another takeaway that I want you to have. This is my definition of success. We've been talking about the psychology of success. I believe that success is to live life openly and lovingly and authentically to the highest extent possible in the interest of both ourselves and others. So I want you to take care of yourselves, access the support that you do deserve, and I thank you for your service in your communities. If I can be a support or resource, direct message me, email me. If you have any questions, come talk to me outside or just reach out to me anytime. I thank you for your time today. Thank you. Thank you.